I didn't expect much on my birthday. That's what I kept telling myself as I got dressed for work. Just another Tuesday, nothing special. No point in hoping for a text or a call. Not after the last 4 years. Still, I checked my phone before I left the apartment. Nothing. At the office, it was business as usual. Meetings, emails, people chatting about the weekend. Around lunchtime, Nina from the marketing team came over with a single cupcake and a plastic candle. "Happy birthday," she said with a smile. "We didn't forget." I laughed. It sounded lighter than I felt. I thanked her, blew out the candle, and made a joke about getting old. Everyone clapped, then went back to their desks. It was sweet. It really was. But the kindness just made the emptiness stand out more. After work, I stopped by the grocery store and picked up a small bottle of wine, told the cashier I was celebrating something minor. She nodded like she understood and said nothing more. At home, I poured a glass, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the couch. The cupcake from Nina sat untouched on the counter. My phone was still blank. I watched it until the screen dimmed and went black. The worst part wasn't the forgetting. It was how normal it had become. No card, no text, no mention. I kept telling myself that adults don't need birthdays, that I shouldn't care. But deep down, I did. I still hoped. Every single year. When the wine was gone, I brushed my teeth, turned off the lights, and went to bed early. The room was quiet, but my mind wasn't. 2 weeks later, they threw Ivy the kind of birthday party I'd never even dared to imagine for myself. The photos started rolling in 2 weeks later. Ivy's Sweet 16. Mom had booked a rooftop restaurant with string lights and a hired DJ. Everyone looked dressed for a magazine shoot. Ivy stood in the center of it all, glowing like the star of a movie I wasn't invited to. I hadn't planned to go. I'd muted the family chat, ignored the flurry of planning texts, and told myself I was done trying to belong. But the night before the party, Ivy called. "Please come," she said. "It wouldn't feel right without you." Her voice was soft, and it caught me off guard. Ivy had never been cruel. She was just used to being the one they celebrated. She didn't create the gap between us. She was simply handed the better side of it. So I said yes. The venue was stunning. Ivy wore a deep blue dress, hair curled, makeup glowing. My parents floated from guest to guest, proudly retelling stories about her grades, her volunteering, her future. No one asked me how I was doing. I stood near the back, sipping flat soda, smiling when someone looked my way. Then came the speech. Dad tapped his glass. "We're so proud of you, Ivy," he said, his voice catching. "You're kind, brilliant, and full of potential. And to show you just how much we believe in you..." Mom stepped forward, dangling a set of keys from her hand. "It's parked outside, sweetheart." The room went still, then exploded in applause. Ivy covered her mouth, burst into tears, and hugged them both as cameras flashed. People clapped like it was the happiest moment in the world. I clapped too. Quietly, mechanically. She got a car. I didn't get a phone call. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I wasn't angry about the car itself. It was what it stood for. The speech, the effort, the pride. All the things I'd never been given, not even in fragments. That was the night I stopped making excuses for them. The next morning, I couldn't look at my phone without hearing the applause in my head. The echo of their cheers for Ivy felt louder than anything I'd ever been given. I poured coffee I didn't drink, paced around my apartment, tried to distract myself with emails and tasks that didn't matter. I kept replaying things that hadn't bothered me at the time, or that I told myself shouldn't. The way Mom framed Ivy's participation ribbon in the hallway while my perfect GPA barely got a good job. How I'd begged for guitar lessons in middle school and been told money was tight, only to see Ivy come home a week later with custom riding boots. How I'd spent months saving for a refurbished laptop for school while Ivy unwrapped a brand new MacBook on Christmas morning with matching accessories and a bow. Back then, I tried to rationalize it. She's younger. They're learning. They'll do better next time. I told myself that so often it became reflex. But after that party, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. It wasn't about age. It wasn't about learning. It was about who they chose to see and who they didn't. I pulled out a box from the back of my closet. I hadn't opened it since I moved into my apartment. It was full of old receipts, printed emails, tax forms, the stuff I thought I might need someday, but never did. I wasn't sure what I was even looking for. Maybe proof. Maybe closure. Maybe a reason to stop thinking I was overreacting. Near the bottom, I found it. A bank statement in their name. Pages of transactions. Most were ordinary groceries, utilities, gas. But one stood out. Tuition payment. Ridgeview University. $12,780. It wasn't just one. There were 3. All in Ivy's name. All in the past year. I sat there staring at the numbers. I remembered Ivy boasting about getting a full scholarship, about how proud our parents were of her for earning it all on her own. I remembered sitting through that speech at dinner last Thanksgiving when Dad said we didn't have to lift a finger, she made it happen herself. They lied. They lied to everyone. To me. To themselves. To her. And suddenly, it wasn't just about the birthday. It wasn't even about the car. It was about the years of pretending. The careful, quiet calculations that were made in rooms I was never invited into. I stared at the paper until the ink blurred. Then, I folded it, slid it into an envelope, and placed it on my desk. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew who needed to see it. The call came 3 days later. I recognized the number instantly, and for a second I considered letting it go to voicemail. But something in me, it wasn't hope, but something thinner and harder made me answer. "Hi, sweetie," Mom said, her voice light like nothing had happened. "How are you?" I leaned against the kitchen counter. "I'm fine," I said, though my voice had no color. There was a pause, just long enough to feel unnatural. Then she cleared her throat. "Listen, I wanted to talk to you about something. We're trying to figure out how to handle Ivy's car insurance," she said. "It's just until we get through the next few months. Do you think you could help cover it? Just a little." I didn't say anything right away. I stared at the envelope still sitting on my desk, the one with the tuition payments. My free hand tightened around the edge of the counter. "You're serious?" I asked. My voice came out softer than I intended, like it had to squeeze past everything I was holding back. "Come on, Celine. You know how things are. You've always been the responsible one. You've got your own place, your job. We just figured you'd understand." I could feel the anger rising in my throat, slow and thick. "You forgot my birthday. Again. For the 5th year in a row. And now you're calling me to ask for money for Ivy's car." "Oh, don't be dramatic," she said, exasperated. "You know we love you. But Ivy's still starting out. She's only 16. We're just trying to give her the best start we can." I pressed my fingers into my temple. "This isn't about the car," I said. "It's about everything. It's about how you've spent years treating me like I don't exist, like I'm just convenient." "That's not fair," she said quickly. "We've done our best for both of you. You were always the one who didn't need as much." Her words hit like a slap. Not because they were new, but because they were familiar. I'd heard them before in 1,000 different forms. Strong, independent, fine on your own. No one ever asked what it took to become that way. "I can't do this," I whispered. "Celine." I hung up. The silence after was immediate and sharp. I stood there, hand still on the counter, breathing like I'd run a race. My cheeks burned. My eyes stung, but no tears came yet. I crossed the room, picked up the envelope, and held it in both hands. My fingers trembled. I knew it was time to stop waiting for them to see me. It was time to make them look. I texted them the next morning. Short, direct. "We need to talk. All of us. Sunday." Mom replied within minutes with an enthusiastic, "Of course, looking forward to it." Dad didn't respond. Ivy just sent a thumbs-up emoji. I spent the rest of the week rehearsing what I was going to say, rewriting it in my head, then throwing it all away and starting over. No version ever felt enough. But I wasn't going there for their comfort. I was going to make them sit with what I had carried. Sunday came. The house looked the same as it always had, too clean, too bright, like nothing ugly ever happened there. I rang the bell, even though I still had my key. Mom opened the door smiling like I was just home for a visit. I didn't smile back. They were already sitting in the living room when I walked in. Dad on one end of the couch, arms crossed like a man bracing for something unpleasant. Mom sat next to him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Ivy curled up in the armchair by the window, looking nervous but trying to smile. "Thanks for being here," I said, though I didn't mean it. "There's something I need to say, and I need you to hear it all the way through." Mom gave a quick nod. "Of course, sweetheart." I took a breath, reached into my bag, and pulled out the envelope. I didn't hand it to anyone. I just held it. "You forgot my birthday again," I started. 5 years in a row. Not a text. Not a card. And I kept telling myself it didn't matter, that I was grown, that I didn't need anything from you. They shifted but said nothing. "But then you threw Ivy that party. You gave speeches. You cried. You gave her a car." And I clapped like I wasn't dying inside. Mom's eyes were already glassy. Dad looked at the floor. "I found your bank statements, the ones showing you've been paying Ivy's tuition. After telling me for years you couldn't help me. After I worked 2 jobs to keep my apartment and finish school." There was a pause. Mom sniffled. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she said softly. Ivy's so young. She needed more help. You've always been so strong." I looked at her, then at Dad, who still hadn't spoken. "That's the story you've told yourselves, that I didn't need anything because I never asked. That strength means not deserving support." I turned to Ivy, who had gone quiet. Her eyes were wide, almost guilty. "I didn't ask for any of this," she said. "I didn't even know about the tuition." "I know," I said, "and I don't blame you. But you still got everything I was told we couldn't afford. You got the best of them, and I got what was left." No one said anything. Just silence thick enough to press against my skin. "If I don't matter to you the same way she does," I said finally, "then I'm done. I won't keep showing up for people who can't even see me." And then I walked out for the last time without looking back. I didn't block their numbers immediately, but when the silence lasted longer than I expected, I knew exactly what I had to do next. I blocked their numbers the following Tuesday. I didn't make a scene about it. No final message, no dramatic declaration. Just opened my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and pressed the buttons one by one. It was clinical. Quiet, like closing a window before a storm. At first, the silence felt like relief. No more waiting for messages that never came. No more pretending to be okay with their casual erasure. I woke up without that tight ache in my chest. I made coffee without scanning my notifications. I felt steady, maybe for the first time in months. I filled my time with things I'd forgotten how to love. I pulled out my old sketch pads, the ones I had stuffed into a drawer after college when work and exhaustion took over. I started hiking again early in the mornings before the trails got crowded. The quiet out there felt different, honest. The wind didn't ask anything of me. I started therapy. I didn't tell anyone. I just went every Thursday at 5 p.m. to a small office that smelled faintly of lavender and old carpet. At first I didn't know what to say. Then one day I started talking and didn't stop. About the birthdays, the silence, the way being strong became an identity I never wanted. My therapist asked me once, "When did you learn that being loved meant being useful?" I didn't have an answer. A week after the meeting, Ivy texted me from a different number. "They're worried. You're hurting yourself, Celine. This isn't healthy. You don't have to cut us off like this." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't reply. Ivy meant well, I knew that. She always had. But she hadn't lived the quiet rooms I had. She hadn't sat at birthday dinners that never had a seat for her. She hadn't been the one who made herself small to keep the family comfortable. And she still didn't understand that this time walking away wasn't about punishment. It was about clarity. It wasn't just the silence that was healing me. It was knowing I chose it. Some nights I still felt the old pull, check your phone, see if they called, maybe they finally understand. But I'd sit with that feeling, let it wash over me like a wave I didn't have to fight anymore. And when the silence stayed, I let it. Until one Saturday when someone rang my doorbell. I opened the door and there he was, my father standing on the porch like someone who wasn't sure if he'd come to say sorry or be told to leave. He looked smaller than I remembered, older. His hands were shoved into his pockets and he kept his eyes just slightly off mine. "Can I come in?" he asked. I didn't answer, but I stepped aside. He sat on the edge of the couch like it wasn't his place anymore. For a long time, he didn't say anything. Then, finally, "We didn't mean to hurt you, Celine. We thought we were doing what was best. Ivy needed more. And you always figured things out." I sat across from him, hands in my lap. "You made me figure things out." He flinched slightly, like the words landed harder than he expected. "I'm not strong because you believed in me," I said. "I'm strong because I didn't have a choice. Because every time I needed something, you told me we couldn't afford it. But somehow, you always found a way for Ivy." He didn't argue, just nodded slowly, staring down at the floor like it might hold some answer he hadn't found in me. When he left, I didn't walk him to the door. Later that night, Ivy called. This time I picked up. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "The scholarship, it wasn't real." I didn't say anything. "They told everyone I got a full ride, but they've been paying everything, taking out loans. They didn't want you to know. They didn't want me to feel guilty." I closed my eyes. "But you knew." "Not at first," she said. "But yeah, I figured it out, and I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't want them to do it, Celine. I swear I didn't ask for any of it. I believed her. That was the hardest part. She never asked for the pedestal. She was just born into the right role." We sat in silence on the phone for a long time, breathing through something too old to name. "I just wanted to be your sister," she said. And I realized for the first time I might want that too. A year later, my apartment felt different. Not bigger, not quieter, just mine. The kind of stillness that didn't ache anymore. I'd started a new job a few months back. My boss actually remembered my name, asked how I was doing, thanked me for the work I did. It still caught me off guard sometimes how something so small could feel so unfamiliar. Ivy and I talk now. Not every day and not about everything. But there's effort. She asks about my life without expectation, listens without defending our parents. We meet for lunch sometimes, and once she showed me a poem she wrote about sisters who grow up in different houses under the same roof. It made me cry, though I didn't tell her that. Mom and Dad haven't reached out again. I don't know if they ever will. Some part of me used to ache for that, but now it just feels like a fact, like gravity, like something I can live with. I spent my birthday alone this year. I didn't throw a party, didn't post about it, didn't wait for anyone else to remember. I baked myself a small cake vanilla, just like that cupcake from work the year they forgot me for the 5th time. I set one candle in the middle, no singing, no applause. Just me in my kitchen, barefoot, the smell of sugar in the air. I lit the candle, watched the flame flicker for a few seconds, then closed my eyes and breathed in. I didn't make a wish. I didn't need to. When I opened my eyes, the room looked exactly the same, but something in me had shifted quiet certain. This time I didn't need anyone else to show up. I had.